I'm going to preach for you guys today. God has given me a word in my heart that I want to be faithful to encourage you and give you. And I think this is going to really encourage some saints who have ideas in the Lord, but you need to activate those things. And I actually used to preach a lot when I was earlier in my 20s. I was a college pastor at a church, and so I would preach to the college group, and then I would also preach at church, right? And I really enjoyed that and think I was good at it. In the recent years, I haven't actually had the opportunity to do that. So I'm really excited about this opportunity to present a word from God through me to you. And I'm really excited about that. What am I going to preach about and who's it for? I am going to preach for people who have a business idea from God or a passion that's been put on their heart and they haven't activated it. That business idea may be something that you feel like God calls you to start a side hustle or start a business, okay? And you got the ideas and you've been thinking about it. Or you just genuinely have something that you've been wanting to do. You've been wanting to start a nonprofit. You've been wanting to do whatever. This is passion that you have, but you just haven't activated it. So this word is going to encourage, challenge you to, number one, believe in the word that God has put in you and then take action. So I'm going to encourage and challenge you to do that. Last night before I went to bed, I was thinking about this movie, Jurassic Park 3, and I'd seen that movie a couple months ago. And there was a scene where this girl gets eaten by this sea monster, this sea shark. And then I started thinking about Jonah. I was like, Jonah also got ate by a big sea creature, a big whale or a fish. I was thinking about that and went down that rabbit trail. What kind of whale could actually eat a human? Or what was it like being inside of a whale?
About it, Mr. Grumpy Pants. Look around you. We're inside a whale. We're going to be digested. Do you know what that means?
Of course I do. Digestion runs very deep in my family.
I was just going down that rabbit trail. And then this morning I woke up and I was listening to an audiobook, and the chapter I was on was talking about Jonah, using Jonah as an example. And I was like, okay, I think God's trying to speak to me through Jonah's story. Okay, so I'm going to go and start with Jonah. I'm going to preach from scripture today. So I'm going to read from Jonah. But before I do that, I think the foundation of this talk is understanding that when God puts something in you, God is giving you a word. Okay, when God gives you a word, He wants you to take action on it. It's not a suggestion. I think a lot of times we treat God's speaking to us, okay, I'll take that into consideration, God, thank you. No, when God speaks, He's directing us to take action. And so when you have a business idea that you think is from God, when you have a passion or an idea that you want to do, that's probably God that put that in you. In James 1:27, it says that all good things come from a Father above. So if there's something good in you that you want to do, a problem you want to solve in the world, God has probably put that in you. Okay, and if He's put it in you, that's His way of speaking to you, of placing a word inside of you, and He wants you to take action on it. So we're going to talk today about how belief in action can help you activate that word so that you can go and see the byproduct of starting that business or running with that idea that you have. So back to Jonah, chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, saying, 'Rise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me.' But Jonah rose to flee from Tarshish, from the presence of the Lord. He went to Joppa to find a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare, went down into it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord." Okay? So God put something in Jonah to go do, and he's like, not doing it, going to Tarshish. Okay? So on the way to Tarshish, God's trying to redirect Jonah back to Nineveh. So He sends a storm, and everyone's afraid on this boat that their boat's going to sink, and so they're drawing lots. So, okay, there's a reason this storm happening. We think somebody on this ship is like sabotaging us. Like there's some bad luck happening, right? And so they draw lots, and Jonah picks the lot, obviously. And they're questioning Jonah, hey, what's going on? Why is this happening to us? And Jonah basically confesses, hey, this is my fault. Okay, it even says, verse 10, "Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, 'What is it that you have done?' for the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of God because he had told them. So Jonah has like already said, yo, I'm running from God. And these guys know that. And they're like, okay, you're running from God and this big storm just came in. So help us, right? And Jonah's response is, pick me up and hurl me into the sea, and then the sea will quiet down for you. Okay, so a couple of things there. Number one, Jonah's disobedience is putting a lot of people at risk. Okay, Jonah's disobedience is putting these guys at risk of like potentially dying if their ship sinks. It says in Jonah chapter 4, verse 19, that there were more than 120,000 people in Nineveh that needed to be saved. So we're talking about a lot of people here, that Jonah's disobedience, his unbelief, is causing a lot of people to be in potential harm's way, including himself. So that's number one. Like, how many times have we heard of a word from the Lord or gotten an idea and just sat on it, right? Not thinking, I wonder who would be impacted by if I took action on this. If I was like courageous and I pushed through my fears, if I did whatever it took to make this thing happen, who would be impacted? So let that stir urgency in you to take action on those things, because you don't know who needs to be helped. You don't know who needs to be saved. You don't know whose business needs your strategy specifically, what organizations need you to step up, what vulnerable populations need you to get out there and serve them. Let that kind of mull around. The second thing is, Jonah is supposed to be on mission. Jonah is supposed to be going to Nineveh. Okay? So the fact that he's saying, throw me into the sea and it will quiet down for you, is him giving up on the mission. He's not supposed to be dead. If he's dead, he can't do the mission. He's the prophet. So that's why God sent him to Nineveh, because he's the prophet. Him giving up on that is him giving up on the mission. So he can't do that. For him to save, he needs to be like, hey, y'all, take me to Nineveh and we're going to be good. Because that's where I'm supposed to be going. So that's just crazy to think that he would rather die than obey God and fulfill his mission. So that's just some crazy insight there. Wow, we got to be on mission, and we got to stay on mission, and we got to do whatever it takes to stay on mission. We cannot divert from the path based on circumstances that are happening to us. We got to stay on mission to obey the calling, the word that God has spoken and put in our hearts. Because if it's there, he put it there, okay? So they throw him into the sea. We know the story. He gets swallowed by the fish. He's in there for 3 days. The fish spits him out into dry land. And then we start off at chapter 3. And it says, arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Okay. We're going to skip to verse 5. And it says, Jonah began to go into the city, going on a day's journey, and he called out, yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast, put on a sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least of them. The word reached the king of Nineveh, and he rose from his throne, removed his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he issued a proclamation and published through Nineveh, by decree of the king and his nobles, let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed or drink water, but let every man and beast be covered with sackcloth. Okay, so he goes on. Basically, he's sending a proclamation. Yo, we are turning from our ways, and we are fasting and praying that we won't be destroyed. Okay? Now, I want to go back to something that I would have read over, but not a week ago, okay? So a week ago, I started studying Hebrews, okay? And so where it says the people of Nineveh believe God, okay? I would have skipped past that if I hadn't read Hebrews last week. And so I'm gonna go over to Hebrews 3. In Hebrews 3, there's a couple different verses here. Hebrews 3:12 says, take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you away from the living God. Okay, so an evil, unbelieving heart. Okay, now we go down to verse 16. For who were those who heard yet rebelled? Was it not all those who left Egypt led by Moses, and with whom was he provoked for 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness? For whom did he swear that they would not enter his rest, but to those who were disobedient? So we see that they were unable to enter because of unbelief. They were unable to enter the rest because of unbelief. Okay, so unbelief is evil. Unbelief will block you from the rest that God has for you. Unbelief will block you from activating the blessings that God has for your life. Unbelief might be the thing that's keeping you from seeing that God has already answered your prayer. The prayer you've been praying for breakthrough for these years and weeks and asking God for revelation and fasting, and God, I already spoke to you and you just don't believe me. Okay? So it's incredible that the people of Nineveh heard the voice of the Lord and they believed him. And let's just see, here's what God did about it. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, God relented of the disaster that he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. Because of their belief in the word that God had put in them and immediately taking action, God took away the disaster. God responded. Okay? Let that encourage your heart and challenge you that the thing that you need is on the other side of obedience and belief in God. Okay? And I'll make another video about unpacking unbelief, right? Because I think there's a lot of layers to that and defining what is faith, and how can we believe. But just for today, I want to stay here in this story of Jonah. And we'll talk about, so what happened. Basically, Jonah does his job and he goes up and basically to a high place, and he's still expecting God to burn up the city. So Jonah is still living in unbelief. Even after all this happened to him, Jonah is still living in unbelief. And so we're going to go to chapter 4, where it says, "Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it's better for me to die than to live." All this is after Jonah went and did his thing, and he saw that God wasn't going to destroy the city. And his next response is, "God, just kill me." So this is like his second time trying to die to keep from believing in what God has spoken to him. This is incredible unbelief. Okay? And so let's see what happens. Now Jonah went out of the city and sat at the east of the city and made a booth for himself. There he sat under it into the shade till he should see what would become of the city. Now the Lord God appointed a plant and made it come over Jonah, that it might be a shade over his head to save him from his discomfort. Okay, so Jonah was exceedingly glad because of the plant. But when dawn came up the next day, God appointed a worm that attacked the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind on the sun. When the sun rose, God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on the head of Jonah, so he was faint. Again, unbelief is just not working out for Jonah. Time after time, his unbelief, asking God to kill him and asking God to just end it all, right? In the same way that God was compassionate on the people of Nineveh, God was compassionate on Jonah. But even then, he goes into suffering. There's this heat that's beating down on him, right? Because he's sitting there waiting for God to blow up the city or whatever, and he's just living in the unbelief. And so God just obviously brings heat. He's putting him into suffering to redirect him out of that unbelief. So I think there's sometimes suffering is like a redirection out of unbelief. It allows us to look at God so he can redirect us. Okay, so then Jonah again makes a plea to die. He says, "It is better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Do you do well to be angry for the plant?" And he said, "Yes, I will do well to be angry enough to die." Crazy. That's 4 times. And the Lord said, "You pity the plant for which you did not labor, nor did you make it grow, which came into being in a night and perished in a night. And should I not pity Nineveh, the great city in which there were more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from their left hand, and also much cattle?" As soon as they chose to turn and believe God, that activates a blessing in their lives, right? And so we see that Jonah continued to live in unbelief, and so he continued to miss the blessings. But even in that, though, even in his disbelief, even in his disobedience, God was still having compassion on him. So let that be an encouragement to you as someone who maybe you've been walking in unbelief for the thing that God's put in you and the word that God has spoken to you. There's compassion that the Lord is still there, standing with you, leading you to him, leading you to show you that you can believe God. What miracles has he done already in your life? What blessings have already happened that God is showing his compassion and his grace for you to lead you back to what he's calling you to do? And so I just want you to take the story of Jonah and decide who you want to be. Do you want to be the person who hears the voice of the Lord at the people of Nineveh and takes action? Okay? And whatever that is. And so whether that's you starting a business, a ministry, a nonprofit, or organization, whatever that thing is, go take action immediately on the thing that God has called you to do. And it doesn't mean you have to have the full picture, but go take action. And if you're someone who wants to start a business, if you're someone who wants to take the knowledge that you have in your head, you want to package that up and sell that, then that's my mission. God has called me to build kingdom businesses with people who want to sell their knowledge, who want to create educational products. So if that's you, click the link in my description and book a clarity call, and we can discuss if we're a right fit for each other, if I'm the person God has brought into your life to help you with that. If not, I have a ton of other great content on my page that I think will encourage you in your walk in the Lord and encourage you in business or ministry or whatever you're working on. But don't stay stuck. Don't allow unbelief, fear, whatever it is, to keep you from fully walking into the blessing that God has for you, into the rest that God has for you, into the provision that God has for you. If you've been praying a prayer, let that prayer be, God, would you heal my unbelief? Would you change my unbelief so that I can see what you're saying, I can hear what you're saying, I can take action, and you can reveal the wisdom, the strategy, and the things that you're calling me to do to let this thing be realized into its full potential. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe. See you next time.